Welcome to the Signal Drop, where we discuss all things telecoms. Whether you're a newbie, a nerd, or anything in between, this podcast is for you.
So over the course of this podcast, you'll hear from the Mpirical trainers imparting their knowledge, you'll hear from the Mpirical team, and from time to time, we'll even bring in the odd guest speaker. Hello everyone, welcome to episode 2 of the Mpirical podcast, The Signal Drop. With me in the podcast studio today is Tom. We've also got, you can say hello, Tom.
Hello.
We've also got Kev.
Hello.
And we've got Morgan.
Hi.
Yeah, we've got Morgan with us again. Today, we're back by popular demand, really. We've had an incredible uptake on the first podcast. I think over maybe 1 million listens, something like that.
Gav, that's not entirely true, is it?
Well, it's not actually, because we're recording this podcast even before the first one's gone out. We just like to be organised on these things. However, once again, we've got a fairly relaxed agenda for today. What we're going to do in today's podcast is start off and talk a little bit about some of the different projects that the trainers have been working on, and we'll have Morgan leading that. We'll have some questions as well, and then towards the end of the podcast, the trainers are going to just pick up on some interesting news articles that we've seen of late. When I say the trainers, I'm a trainer, I'm Gavin, and then Tom and Kev are trainers as well. So, Morgan, over to you.
Yes, as the token non-technical person within this group, it's my job here to facilitate the conversation so that our non-technical as well as technical listeners actually want to listen to these things and can understand a little bit more about the technology that surrounds us in our everyday lives. So as Gav said, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the upcoming courses we've got, not because we're trying to promote them in any way.
I was going to say it is just an opportunity for you to ruthlessly plug some of our material.
Of course it is. And did you mention that I am the marketing manager here? Okay,
yes.
Good. Just making sure everybody out there knows that. I'm going to start off with Kev, because you've got our AI and ML for mobile networks course that's about to come out, and everybody is raving about AI.
Of course.
Oh, absolutely.
I thought you were going to say raving about me as a trainer.
No, I wasn't going to say that.
Better, wouldn't it?
But we all know that's true. I did want to ask one really important question, though. Mm-hmm. When are the robots going to take over the world?
Well, at the current rate, Skynet's estimated for around this time next year, I would think. But no, in reality, there is a lot of talk about AI, and in particular, the ethics, the need for regulation. But of course, the flip side of that is it's exciting times for artificial intelligence, provided that it's not used to kind of raise up an army of futuristic robots to come and terminate us all. I'm not sure if we've got a copyright infringement there, but no, clearly there is the potential to utilise AI for goods. I often, when I talk about AI, I think of it as automation with intelligence, but not just intelligence, that kind of dynamic intelligence. So when we talk about mobile networks, for example, it's a great opportunity for us to introduce intelligence into the network when it comes to things such as the management of resources within the network. We know that it's being used and implemented as part of the analytics, the NWDAF in the 5G core. So certainly from a mobile perspective, there are lots of uses for AI, lots of uses for goods. Certainly lots of handset manufacturers looking at how generative AI systems can be integrated into their handsets. So really it's exciting times. I expect that we will see some regulation aimed at preventing AI from growing out of control, if indeed that is the case. But certainly there's a lot of good that can come of AI and a lot of intelligent automation that we can introduce into lots of different technologies.
Okay, so for the non-technical people listening here, when you talk about how mobile operators are going to be utilizing AI technology, what do you mean by that?
Well, I don't want to make any network engineers nervous, but what we might see, as I say, is increased automation within 5G networks. We're likely to see, much more dynamic management of resources. So the benefit here for consumers, for end users, is that ultimately they'll be provided with a better quality of service because we've got intelligence in the network that is able to adapt to changing conditions. It's able to configure elements of the network. without having to, obviously clearly in the past we've got things such as algorithms that will that will allocate resources that are able to react to conditions in the network. But this is a much more intelligent and much more dynamic solution that offers benefits for operators in terms of the management of their networks, but also for end consumers, since it enables networks really to be configured to their needs. And the other thing to mention as well is from an energy efficiency point of view, there are some studies looking at how AI can be integrated into the radio side to provide better use of resources. So in periods of lower demand, for example, we're able to dynamically scale down energy usage. Really AI and machine learning in particular, that's used to train these AI systems, is really there to react, I guess, and I've said this a few times already, but to react dynamically to a multitude of different conditions and require less manual and less human intervention, which hopefully isn't bad news for employees of equipment vendors and mobile operators, but certainly we might see a change in their roles, for example. But we can expect the future networks, so even with 5G now, but with 6G, these networks are likely to be much more complex. So we need that level of intelligence in the network, because it simply wouldn't be feasible to have these manual procedures or these kind of typical kind of the algorithms that might have been used in the past. So AI will grow with the system itself. So that's another benefit.
And I think that's us, folks. We're out of time. So,
Have I mentioned that I'm a talker?
No, I was going to ask him another question, but no, okay.
If you invite Kev along, we won't get a word in edgeways.
No,
That's Kevin Moore podcast coming soon.
That was a fairly comprehensive overview, but I think, you're not going to sell the course now, Kev. Everybody listen to that.
Sorry, but I've given away all my secrets, sorry.
Right, so thank you for that again. And now swiftly over to Tom, our cybersecurity specialist. Try saying that 10 times fast. Tom, you've just released the Resilience in Telecommunications course. Can you tell our audience a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, of course. I think it's important when developing courses that you have a justification surrounding why it needs to be developed, apart from Gav telling me that I need to do some work. It's important to understand from a perspective of a normal user who obviously utilises mobile networks that they don't really appreciate the complexities that exist of 4G, 5G, and in the future 6G. So it's kind of diving into the complexity behind the resilience and what's implemented just provides another overview of how complex these networks are. And I think that they're definitely underappreciated. So the course itself, we're talking about examples of things such as poor resilience that has existed previously. And we have, especially with 5G, a dependency on cloud infrastructure as well. So we have another level of resilience that we need to consider there, and resilience implications if cloud infrastructure goes down. We need to think about things such as risks to resilience as well in different areas of 5G. And also resilience just generally in telecommunication networks. What do we actually implement in traditional networks, in 5G networks, and how that allows us to enhance telecommunications networks overall. And I also, as you said, have a background in cybersecurity, so I like to kind of force some of the risk management aspects in there as well. I enjoy that element of telecommunications and of resilience.
Thanks. I'm just curious to know, and again, token non-technical person here, we've got everything in the cloud now, which is great. But what impact has moving things to the cloud had on cybersecurity versus having things more on hardware?
So it's aligned it with more traditional IT approaches to IT, I guess. It's more traditional IT systems. So from a telecommunications standpoint, the attack surface of 5G has increased because it's aligned with how traditional infrastructure operates. So the barrier to entry for attacking 4G infrastructure is a lot higher than what it is for 5G. So we have more people that are able to attack this infrastructure in comparison to previous generations.
Oh, wow.
Purely because the technology in the cloud is more widely understood.
Yeah, it's more widely understood, more widely aligned, yeah.
Okay. So that's why everybody listening should go and buy your course, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
And my course
Code
on
Morgan
cloud
and check out.
Isn't it true also though, Tom, that you've just put together a course on a real hot topic, which is PFCP?
Yeah.
Right, no, stop with the acronyms, please. What is it?
Packet forwarding control protocol. And
You had that written down.
No,
You did.
no, I've just got a
it's
head full of
ingrained
acronyms.
into his mind. Trust me, we quiz him.
I think it's probably a bit too much for this session, but we have just launched a wider course on 5G protocols. So PFCP being one of them, but we touch on all the other big protocols, which I won't start reeling off. But we've done that because our LTE protocols course was, or still is actually, a popular course. So we followed suit with 5G, and that will be gradually getting released moving forward.
Well, I think that then leads on to you, Gav. We are looking at 5G and transport networks next, which is one of our courses that we've released as well.
Yeah.
Why is that important right now?
So we've had a 5G and transport networks course for quite a while. So this is an update, and it's designed to reflect what's been happening more recently in the 5G space. So there's a lot of interest in the radio part of 5G to take a base station, a G node B as it's called, and to disaggregate it into separate functional elements. And the reason we do that is to try to make the deployment of the 5G radio access network cheaper, but also give a bit of deployment flexibility, which I guess is the origins of Open RAN. Now, if you start pulling apart a base station and you start geographically separating the different function elements of a base station, you need to connect it all together, and that's where the transport network part comes in. And the thing with 5G is there's so many different features of 5G that might occur in the radio network and such like. They all have a massive impact on the transport network. So it's not a case of just deploying this shiny new technology. We've also got to think about what's in the ground and how everything gets connected. So, a decision to deploy a massive MIMO antenna, for example, or maybe carrier aggregation or something like that, has got a huge impact in the volume of data that starts getting shifted around the network. So it's great to have these fantastically high speeds, super low latency, but we've got to remember that there is an impact on the transport infrastructure. We've already got transport networks that are out there, but there's a big question over whether they're all high enough capacity at this time. So the whole point in writing this course and putting it together was to talk about all the different high-level technologies that can impact the transport network. And we've tried to put some figures in there as well. So, if you do add this kind of technology over this kind of channel size, this is the kind of data throughput you might need. What we've also done is provided a highlight of some of the kind of technologies that get used in the transport network as well. So it's a bit of a mixture. Are you still awake, Morgan?
No, I am awake. I'm just interested. I know we don't specialize in fiber, but with wireless transport, what's the difference in the amount of data that can be transmitted via a wireless infrastructure versus fiber?
When you're talking wireless, your natural kind of bottleneck is the fact that you need radio for transmission. And the capacity of a piece of glass, a piece of fibre optic is huge, absolutely huge. And the problem with radio is, although we've got lots of radio spectrum, it is finite, and it's not for the sole use of cellular. So there's lots of technologies that use radio spectrum, and cellular is limited to certain parts of the radio spectrum. And we talk about these things called channel sizes, and that relates to the chunk of radio spectrum that an operator might be able to use. So, when you've got a piece of fibre, you don't have that restriction. It's not necessarily having to be shared by lots of different technologies and such like. It's a totally different ballgame, really, and that's the issue. It's just quite a restrictive, competitive space for wireless.
Cost-wise, though, what's the difference between them?
You just need to look at the auctions, really. The auctions on wireless spectrum. I mean, 3G is a particularly bad example of how much can be charged for radio spectrum. It's changed in 4G and it's changed a little bit in 5G. But you see some quite significant amounts of money being spent just on the privilege of having some license that only some licensed spectrum that only an organisation can use. But then with fibre, the fibre itself might not be particularly expensive in the grand scheme of things, but as soon as you start the civil engineering to actually put the fibre in the ground, it becomes incredibly expensive. But once it's in there, there's all kinds of technologies you can use across the fibre to increase throughput. We talk about things like this, this one, dense wave division multiplexing, DWDM, which can really increase the capacity of fibre.
Don't forget to subscribe to our Decoding Telecoms newsletter if you want to get these acronyms decoded.
Great
Sellout session there.
Yeah, so there we go. 5G
Okay.
transport networks. Oh,
Thanks,
one
Kev.
thing I will add, we've also just dropped a bunch of extra call flows on NetX as well, so it's not really a training course related thing, but on NetX we've kind of redesigned the way our call flows work. If you've not seen them, these call flows are really a high level view of how something like maybe a 4G to 2G call might work, or a 5G to 4G call might work. So it shows you the high level network elements, and it shows you the way in which the voice would flow over the network. So we've got a bunch of those already. We've redesigned them a little bit. We've added a whole bunch of 5G VoNR call flows, and we've also added some extra procedures as well, like registrations and handovers, just to explain how these things take place at quite a high level without actually getting into the detail of signal flow. So that has just been added to NetX as well.
Yes, so go to our website to check that out if you haven't already. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about an article that I came across last night. I think we're just over 100 days out from the 2024 Paris Olympics, and the article that I read about is very relevant to Tom's realm in cybersecurity because evidently there's a lot of potential risk involved with cybersecurity threats, and it's almost guaranteed that there will be attempts to hack the network.
Yeah.
So I know, Tom, I shared that with you last night. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's to be expected, to be honest. We've seen historically the Olympics being attacked. In 2018 we saw the Winter Olympics be attacked, and people weren't actually able to enter the opening ceremony because of that. So if you actually look at some of the pictures of the 2018 Winter Olympics, you can see that half of the stands are empty because the app which was being used for people's tickets just wasn't functioning due to, I'm not exactly sure what it was, and it's never really been released, but some sort of hack which occurred. So I'm not surprised that they're anticipating for something like this to happen. We obviously have some countries being banned from the Olympics as well now, such as Russia. So we see maybe some retaliation there in terms of, they're not allowed to enter it, so they're trying to cause as much disruption as possible. But the thing is with these types of attacks, they are more weapons of mass disruption, not weapons of mass destruction. So
Right.
it's more of an annoyance.
That's good, that. I like that. Did you make that up yourself?
No, that was actually in the article. I just stole it.
I think what'll be quite interesting though for the Olympics is just keeping things on a kind of a mobile perspective for now. There's a lot of stadiums that are going to be used naturally, a lot of sporting venues. There's going to be a lot of connectivity that needs to be supported, and inevitably 5G and 4G and Wi-Fi will all be playing a part in those stadiums. There will no doubt be private 5G solutions going in place as well. So it'll be interesting to see the attack vectors that may get used.
Well, in 2018, that was one of the attack vectors, was the Wi-Fi. So you probably are right of that transitioning into 4G and 5G as well. And they were expecting to see 12 times more attacks in comparison to the Tokyo Olympics in 2021.
Okay.
So it's in the billions.
Yeah, I think the problem is when a lot of infrastructure is deployed to support things like smart ticketing. We saw with the Champions League final, for example, which was also held in France, that there were some issues that may or may not have been caused by a cyber attack, but clearly there are opportunities there for quite mass disruption of events. And what's interesting is I heard Emmanuel Macron talking about how they may need to change the opening ceremony from this really ambitious ceremony down the banks of the Seine to perhaps in one venue. And again, as Gav mentioned, we've got all these different potential technologies that are in use. We've got much greater densities of people in attendance than what we might see typically. And clearly any cyber attack there has the potential to cause if not major disruption, certainly embarrassment to the organising, to the French government.
I'm going to throw a curveball in. Kev, with AI and ML being part of your specialty, do you see any way for us to help ward off potential cyber threats through use of algorithms or AI and machine learning?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly machine learning and AI will have a part to play in terms of cyber defences, but the flip side of that is it's also a tool that can be used by cyber attackers. So in some ways it becomes a bit of a zero-sum game.
It's an arms race.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So, and I think it will be, as we see now, where one side makes advances, the other side will catch up, and it becomes this sort of this constant game of cat and mouse between defensive cybersecurity and attacks and things like that. So yes, it has the ability to help, but it also has the ability to support attackers. So the net sum there really is probably zero, unless one side can gain a significant advantage over the other, particularly where we see bad actors that are backed by nation states, for example, where they've got a lot of there's a lot of resources being thrown at that from the bad guys as well as the good guys.
I think, though, if anything, correct me if I'm wrong, but the field of security has been benefiting and maybe pioneering to a degree the use of ML and AI for some time now, I guess, because intrusion prevention systems that have been around for quite a long time have used analytics on the network to predict an attack before it even takes
You have
place.
smart firewalls as well, next generation firewalls that are similar using AI and ML.
Yeah, one of the great things about ML is its ability to pattern match very, very quickly, much faster than perhaps traditional algorithms or human eyes might detect it. So that's the benefit there. We're able to analyse huge amounts of data and look for patterns or things that don't fit a particular pattern to enable us to detect anomalies.
I would say historically, though, from my experience, things like this normally benefit malicious actors over people defending against these attacks. It's normally the people that are defending that are playing constant catch-up and evolving to meet the adversary's complexities.
Oh, I think, again, it's a very relevant topic right now, or at least it will be by the time we release this podcast. So thank you all for weighing in on that. I know I've been asking lots of questions of you guys. Do you have any questions or anything you want to raise? Anything that's worth discussing?
Yes, what does DWDM stand for, Morgan?
Do what?
It was dense.
Don't
look at Stuart. Right. Kev, you were going to speak there.
Yeah, I think the thing to add on, I feel like I don't want to talk too much now because I was admonished earlier, so I'll try and keep this really succinct, is that we didn't really talk about generative AI. One of the things that we took away from Mobile World Congress in Barcelona this year, which might as well have been renamed Generative AI World Congress, is that Gen AI was absolutely everywhere. People want to know, exactly how it can be used, and lots of people will be familiar with the concept of generative AI, the ability to use AI systems to generate new content, such as images, music, voices. We could all be, generative AI avatars just sat doing a podcast right now. You'd never know.
We're not.
So yeah, Gen AI, really significant. It's likely to remain a significant area of AI. We've got device manufacturers looking to integrate things such as small language models into their handsets, which are kind of smaller versions of the systems that you might see used in things such as ChatGPT, for example. And this enables for the use of Gen AI on handsets. So I know that Honor at Mobile World Congress we're demoing their new, I think it's the Magic Pro handset, that use things like face tracking, so you didn't even need to touch the handset, that use generative AI, for lots of different functions within the phone itself, which of course raises some questions about privacy and security and things such as that. So that brings us back to that ethics and regulation. So yeah, I think Gen AI is likely to be a hugely significant area over the next 12 months, and it just so happens that I've written a course on it. So I'll use this opportunity to make a plug for that. So we'll shortly be releasing a course that focuses quite specifically on generative AI in a general sense. So our AI and ML course that we've released already is focused on mobile networks, but for this one it's more of an overview of generative AI and its impact. So yeah, that's all from me. Thank you, Morgan.
So generative AI is going to be the thing that takes over my job.
Well, I don't know whether we can replace your very skilled marketing expertise and abilities.
It's probably going to replace us more.
Yeah,
as technical
I'd be more
trainers.
worried, to be honest. This is why I'm trying to launch a career in podcasting. I'm not sure how it's going so far.
I was going to mention a news article that I'd actually read yesterday. Now, Mpirical are an independent telecoms training company, so we're not affiliated with any vendors. However, this particular news article came from Samsung and Qualcomm. Please don't think that Samsung and Qualcomm are sending us loads of free kit for this.
I wish.
We don't have an office full of Snapdragon chips or anything like that.
But they can.
Right, so there's just been a kind of an announcement from them that they've just ran basically a 1024 QAM test for 5G, and they've done it on both FDD and TDD operation. Now, why is this significant? I hear Morgan asking.
I'm just interested in the word quam.
So, QAM.
Quam bam, thank you, ma'am.
No, Kev.
Thought it would be a snappy title for a future podcast all about quam.
Not quite, Kev. QAM, Morgan, is quadrature amplitude modulation. What on earth is that, right? So remember we were talking earlier on about those bits of radio that you use. So when you're using your phone, you're using a radio channel.
Sure.
And that you will be given resources, all right, the base station, so that you can send and receive traffic to the network. You'll be given radio resources, and what you want to do is you want to squeeze as much information on that radio resource as you can. So the higher order the QAM, the more information you can squeeze onto the radio bearer in a given amount of time. So most networks at the minute, the best they do is 256 QAM, and even that's relatively rare. So 256 QAM at the moment, but Samsung and Qualcomm have announced that they've ran a trial with 1024 QAM. It's kind of a release 17 feature from the 3GPP, and using a 20 megahertz channel, they managed to get a 485 megabits per second throughput, which is very impressive. Why is it relevant? Well, I said to you earlier on that radio resources are scarce, so we need to make sure that the technologies that get used are as spectrally efficient as possible. So if you can use 1024 QAM instead of 256, fantastic, because it's going to increase your data throughput in the same period of time that you might be using that radio bearer. The downside is you're probably going to need to be stood pretty close to the base station to be using 1024 QAM, because it does require a really good radio signal.
Or small cells, right?
Or small cells, yeah.
And how does the network know how to give priority in terms of resource to different devices?
Well, if you think of a cell, and here's where we wish Phil was in the podcast today, but if you think of a cell, lots of different devices in the cell, all at different ranges away from the kind of the base station itself, all in different environments, indoor, outdoor, quite cluttered environments, quite open environments. So everybody's experiencing the radio conditions in different ways. So in order for the base station to understand how to treat everybody, the phones have to, or well, not necessarily the phones, but the devices have got to report to the base station on what level of signal strength and signal quality they are receiving, and the base station can make the decisions. So, okay, that phone can quite happily use 1024 QAM, but this phone over here, right at the edge of the cell, needs to use, I don't know, QPSK 16 QAM.
Could it make that decision based on somebody maybe streaming video versus somebody just making a phone call?
It's more to do with signal quality,
Right, okay.
signal strength, as opposed to the content that's getting delivered.
Right.
Management of that, you potentially see that happening higher up the stack, related to kind of whether or not quality of experience can be maintained.
Right.
So that's the interesting part that I saw. Obviously, it's just in the labs at the moment, so commercially it's going to be a while before we see it, but it's just that next step onwards in terms of just increasing that data throughput. It's quite interesting.
Thanks, Gav. So now as an American, I like to focus on some very hot topics in the telecommunications world. I've recently heard about something happening with the FCC, and I don't want to steal your thunder, Tom, so would you mind?
Morgan, what is the FCC?
It's the Federal Communications Commission.
Of course it is.
Of course it is, and that is not one
Everybody
of our
knows that, yeah.
Of course it is. It's not one of our glossary terms either on the Mpirical website. I just knew that one again because I am American. Tom, would you like to brief us?
Yeah, so there's the discussions around net neutrality and how it was originally introduced and taken away during Trump's time as president. So it's the discussions there.
That'll be quite interesting to see what happens there. If net neutrality is brought back in, the implications. Obviously, we look at things generally from a mobile perspective, but it's applicable to all operators.
Don't we want competition in the market?
Yeah, I was just going to say, is that what we're talking about here? This idea that we can sell off nicer, nicer bits
We
of
want
resources
socialism
to...
in telecoms.
I think the Obama administration, was quite for net neutrality. The Trump administration got rid of what was put in place, and the FCC, correct me if I'm wrong, are voting to kind of whether or not net neutrality is going to be brought back in. It's really interesting because in all of the generations of cellular technology, even from 3G, there was always and has always been this mechanism to provide quality of service and differentiate one traffic flow from another. And in all of the technology generations, whenever you've connected to the internet, everyone just gets best effort. There's hardly been any differentiation of services, and partly it's been because of different net neutrality laws around the world. So the cellular technologies have always had the capability to differentiate one traffic stream from another, give one traffic stream priority over another. That's always been there without even network slicing. It's not necessarily even a network slicing thing. You can just do it anywhere in these technologies, but there's been restrictions. So actually, if you look at the way the QoS framework is used in cellular networks today, people on the internet will get best effort, and it really gets used for voice services, for Vorna and Volti and things like that. But other than that, it's probably got quite restrictive use. We shall see. It'll be interesting to see what the FCC comes up with this month.
I'll have a chat with my American brethren and let you know if I hear anything.
Okay, Morgan, I think, are we at time now?
Yeah, I think so. And as always, if there are any topics that our listeners would like us to discuss, please feel free to comment or to write to us. You can visit our website, www.mpirical, that's mpirical.com. And we do telecoms upskilling as well, in case you didn't realize from plugging all of our products throughout this podcast. But again, thank you for listening, and we look forward to speaking to you in another couple of weeks.
And one last message before we say, I just want to say good luck to Stuart, because he's got to edit the last hour of content that we've been chatting about. So let's see how it turns out.
All the expletives from Gav's.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.